Hello, it's Joey, and today we're making tags for junk journals using substitutable supplies. We don't all have digitals, we don't all have a sewing machine, so these tags are especially for you if you just have basic or maybe limited supplies. So each of these tags has a strong focal point on the front here, and I've also added collage on the back, so collage in a way that allows you space to write. You could journal on the back here, and for extra detail I've also added an eyelet, and in this case a ribbon, and on some other cases just some thread. So these tags are made from a book page base, and I used a really cheap modern book as the base, and I've added just a few pages on top from something that looks a bit older. But you could also make these tags from just basic cardstock. They are sew or no sew, so I have sewn around them here, but if you add enough glue, and I'll show you how, you don't need to sew with a sewing machine. What I've done is create images to put on the front by stamping and then painting on beautiful music paper. But again, you could stamp any image, you could use any way of colouring them in, or you could simply use an image from a book. I'm going to share the moments in the creative process where you can substitute in your own supplies. And I've made it really easy for you by putting the moments where it's possible to change the supplies with a red or on these process steps. These are in Pinterest and you can take a screenshot. So let's get on and make some lovely tags. So the first thing we're going to do to create beautiful tags like these is create a base. And I'm going to start by making a Masterboard base like one of these, but you could just start by using cardstock. I just think it's incredibly satisfying using our book pages like these to create something which is really sumptuous, and I just love that feel. So I'll create one of these, I'll show you how. We're going to do a little bit of collage on the back to get rid of the ugly papers, and maybe a bit of painty paint on the front. I'll give you some choices, as I said. Then we'll cut it up, we'll decorate it, and we'll turn it into some beautiful tags that suit your style and suit the supplies that you have. So I'm going to begin by, I've actually already torn some pages out. Start with the cheap, readily available, but nevertheless matte book pages. And just for reference, these book pages are 13.5 centimetres by 22, but it doesn't really matter what size they are because we're going to layer them up, we're going to tessellate them. So you need some glue to do this, and because I like to make a lot of tags at once, I like to use my cutting board and fill it. So I just put one book page down at the corner there, and let me grab the rest of them, and then I start to slightly overlap. I like to rotate them so that they overlap with the the little fibres in the book page facing in different directions. I use the corners of my cutting mat to just help me get this square nice and neat, and I just build up like this, and it really is unbelievably satisfying, and it's quite quick to build up your base for your tags. The glue that I am using, as you can see, it's quite liquid. What I do is I actually mix a couple because I like doing that, it's just fun. I mix a little bit of PVA with it's actually a wood glue that I've found in a local, it's not even a craft store, just a local store that sells cleaning products, that sort of thing. The wood glue is too thick, the PVA is too thin, but I have experimented and just brought those two together, and I've got something that works quite well for creating the base. So I'm just building up, and I'm going to do for the base of tags, I'm going to do about 3 layers and then do decorating on top. It will depend on how thick you want the tag. It will depend on the thickness of the book pages that you've got. Just get those on top. You can see I'm overlapping by about 1 inch or 2 and just working my way to the right. And no particular science, so there isn't really a method in where to place things. Just make sure you overlap a little bit. Builds up quickly, doesn't it? Now, I did say that I would be helping you if you wanted to use different supplies or different methods. So of course you don't need to do a masterboard as big as this to begin with. But if you don't want to or don't have a sewing machine for this project, and I think this is a pretty fundamental step, so if you don't want to put some form of stitch around this, at this stage just make sure that you put lots and lots of glue on your papers so that they glue well together, and particularly all the way to the edge, because one of the benefits of sewing these a bit later is that it brings the edges together and makes it really neat and tight. When these are not sewn, I tend to think of that faux pastry, the pastry of 1,000 layers. The little book pages can, particularly if I'm a bit lazy and haven't put enough glue on, they can just have a little bit of a gap between them. So make sure that if you are not intending to use a sewing machine, and that's perfectly reasonable, you may not even want to, even if you have one, then do put lots of glue on, and specifically make sure it goes all the way to the edge, which is probably where we're most likely to miss them out. So what I would do is make sure that I've got about 2 to 3 layers of book page, and because I want to see on the top layer of my tag whatever I've got, so on this one I had some diary. Just show you. So on here I've got diary and I've just sploshed some blue and green paint on. Then whatever's on the top, the front of your masterboard will be seen, although we are going to augment that and make it even more beautiful. On the back of this masterboard we're going to do some more collage. So it's okay if the ugly book page is seen on the back, I think. Now what's ugly to me may not be ugly to you. We all have different preferences. I don't particularly want to see, I think this is even a sort of a teenager's book, which I bought in a thrift shop, so a charity shop, and I really liked it because it is matte. I don't like the quantity of ink that's on each of the pages. I don't like the amount of dark and grey. The sizes are okay, they're quite nice to sort of manipulate and play in a craft project. But what's really good about them is that matte texture of the paper gives us a really great key for the glue. And that means that for tags like this and for using these sheets of paper in a masterboard, it works really well because the paper binds together and we get some really strong and robust tags. So I would just carry on until I've got about 2 or 3 layers across the whole piece. And then I go in with a different book page. Doesn't need to be the same size, but it's still, you know, it's less than the height. It's just a regular book page size, so 13.5 by 20, 5 and a bit inches by nearly 8. And I just take enough, lovely, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5 or 6, let's just see. Voila. Take a few of those, and I'm really using those as a top layer to mask out the cheaper, more basic supplies that I've been using, I find that I can get hold of those cheaper books more easily in my local craft shop. So I just work across so that the front has then got a prettier book page as a basis. So this would just go across the front. And when I've made a masterboard like this, just the base for cardstock, it's usable in so many different ways. You might want to make a few at a time and just set them aside to dry. I've used them as the base of junk journal covers, and then I've done some vintage collage, and that worked really well. I've used them for other tags. I've used them for, I think I used them for a sort of a lapbook folio type project where I folded it over and then I added just all sorts of lovely goodies on the inside, like pockets and flip-flap envelopes, that sort of thing. So you can create lots of these bases and then use them in many different ways. And it's been a while since I used this technique, and I felt like using up some book pages, and why not? What I do when I have a gap like that is just do a little bit of patching. Now, because we're going to cut these down into tags, it doesn't really matter if this patching is a little bit random. I don't necessarily want to build up to 5 or 6 layers. So I would just do something like that. And equally, if I've got a gap across the top here, I might just go in with 2/3 of a sheet, whatever it takes to fill it. So I don't necessarily need to put a whole sheet down. So a bit like you do when you're wallpapering, just fill in the gaps, plenty of glue, go to the edge. So it's not the time really to use a glue stick, or you might be here forever and you might go through rather a lot of glue sticks. That's looking good. So I would finish the job and come up with something that looks a little bit like this. Here I've got gorgeous paper, it's dried, it sounds gorgeous, it feels gorgeous, and it makes me really excited to go on to the next stage. Let's take a look, where we can collage on the back with pale papers, anything you like, and we'll have some fun using digitals if you want to, scrapbook papers, washi tape, and maybe do a bit of painting again, whatever you want to. So let's set aside the one that we've partially made and I'll show you how to move on to step 2. So to collage on the back, I want to create something that's got a degree of pale colours in it, and this is just an example of something I've made. So I thought I would use up some of the papers that I've printed that are beautiful, maybe in that family of neutrals, but are sitting on the side on a shelf in my craft room, and I really want to use up some of what I've already printed. So don't think that I'm suggesting you use digitals. I don't make digitals, I just love using them at the right time. I pulled out some gorgeous pages that have space in them for writing on the back of our tag. When we come to cut these out, I want to have a little bit of space there. So I just thought I'd share some of the beauty of them. I think this is Victoria Designs. I just love the colours, they're beautiful and stunning. That one I'm so tempted to use. I'm also going to use scrapbook paper. That's just stunning, isn't it? But perhaps a bit busy and a bit deep in tone because you want to have space to write. Put that on the side. In a bit I will do a little bit of stamping and painting on music paper, so I wanted to have a suggestion for you if you don't have your own music paper. I have found a digital. That one's lovely, but I think it's too busy. That one's lovely, but also a bit busy. This one I think I might use. That's a gorgeous Louise Heinzel. It's got texture, but it's pale enough to be the back of a tag. So that's a candidate. That's gorgeous, a bit busy. that is already a botanical design, so maybe want something a bit less busy than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm preserving this beautiful front, turn this over and just show you what to do to collage. And don't feel bad about using a whole page, but definitely use whatever you have. So this is a moment to use up scraps, but what I am suggesting is that we think about the fact that these are going to be tags, and then maybe use shades that are not so deep and dark, so there's a possibility of writing on the back of a tag if that's what you want to do. So again, lots of glue, and it doesn't really matter where it goes. I'll just butt it up very neatly to the edge. That works brilliantly. And I don't think it matters that I'm just slapping a whole page on. It will speed up the process here. And what I would do is just, I've got quite a lot of scrapbook paper because I did used to have a play at making cards. So I've pulled out some pale colours. I've got a beautiful swirly design. I think that's K&Co. And I've got something a bit stripy. I think that goes. I think that's good. So I would just fill in here, maybe tear across there. So it's very quick. If we spent ages covering in the back with collage, this project could take a long time. And actually one of the reasons I don't do that is I don't want the back of the tag to be too busy with too many joins when I come to look at it. It's just a design feature that I prefer. So for this project I actually want just a few larger pieces to go on the back of this masterboard rather than using lots of little pieces, which I might do if, for example, I was creating a page in my glue book. I'll trim off in a minute. Make sure I'm on camera and you can see everything. Can you see everything? Are we enjoying this? Oh, gorgeous project for playing with paper. Let's fill in the gap there. You can see I love anything that's simple that involves gluing and sticking. I think I always will. When did you start playing with paper? How old were you when you started playing with paper? And when did your junk journaling appetite emerge? I think I've always done it, honestly, from the age of about 3 or 4. I just loved playing with paper. I'm just going to fill in the gap there. Beautiful paper, gorgeous colours, light and airy, pale enough for writing. And actually this scrapbook paper is gorgeous. It's a really nice quality and I want to use it, and it helps me reduce some of the pile and create lovely things. Right, so I've covered with paper really simply and quickly. Let's just trim off that extra piece. Buried my big scissors. In fact, I can see I've gone over a bit there. Yeah, I've got time to pull it back. It's still a bit squidgy and wet. What I want to do with the rest of the back is really just make use of some supplies that I've got and add a tiny bit of detail but not make it too busy. You could use scraps to add more detail. You could use more digitals. You could use other scrapbook papers. You can use washi tape on the back. Whatever you want, but grab your supplies and mix them up and just add a few extra features. What I like to do is cover up some of these lines, maybe not the ones with ratty-tatty, which I do really like, but I'm going to put something over that line there so that when we cut up the tag, the join of those pieces of paper somehow looks just a bit smarter and intentional. So this is very narrow washi tape with a little bit of blingy gold. So I love using this. It's very easy to tear and it's just dainty and delicate and adds something a bit special. So I might go over an edge like that, and because I like the look of it, I might just add a bit more in here, as if there was a need for a join. And I could go a bit haywire, maybe add a boundary here. I'm not thinking about where I'll cut yet. I'm literally just adding a few bits of detail. So we've got going, and I've got a little tub here of some of the things I've cut out, no particular order. I will just pull out a few neutral coloured elements and we'll add them. I honestly haven't sorted this, this is just what comes. I'll just dig in and pull a few things out. I'm just pulling out things in basic pale hues. That's too big. I could tear it up, but I don't want to. And what else have we got? So a few little bits of element there, labels, all sorts. I think this is a mix of Artie May's, Tracy Fox and Victoria Designs. I'm not putting any big focal points on the back. So I've got a big tickety thing here. So I'll just reduce that in size. Maybe add that. And hopefully when I come to turn this into a tag, it will cut down and through it and I'll get some of this little element on a couple of tags on the back. I have chosen shades of my little pieces here in something that's a bit sympathetic, so blues and neutrals. I think I'll add a bit more of my washi there. You see how it just finishes things off? Just superb. Push that down. Little face. Can't resist one little focal point. Maybe under there to bring them together, so not necessarily standing on their own. Break things up. I'm going quite quickly here. I think this is a project when, if you've got a bit of time, you can just enjoy yourself, take your time and feel good at using up your supplies. I think we'll have something under there. See, it's just building up. Yummy, isn't it? And you can see that with this approach we could very quickly make quite a batch of tags. So I think the Masterboard approach is helpful if you want to do several, or if you like gluing and sticking. So we're not creating an image that we're going to keep. It doesn't really matter what this looks like as a whole. We're trying to get some form of detail so that when we cut up this board, I'll give you the dimensions shortly, into smaller pieces, we've got just a bit of detail on the back of each tag. Just enough to bring it together. So something like, where should we put that? Something like that. I think what I'm going to do is add a bit more washi. I like just tearing down a side, adding some interest. And again, washi in neutral colours is really good as well. So you can see I'm using a grey here, so it's just a stripy grey. My suggestions, if you're interested in washi tape, are to have a hunt around Stationery Pal and the washi tape shop, and I probably have discount codes for both of those in my video description box below. I normally do. So they are quite different, those shops. You get different things, which is why I like to suggest both. So I get my, I'll call it my foiled blingy washi tape from the washi tape shop, but I have some really great staples from Stationery Pal. So take a look at both if you're interested in washi tape, and I find it a really great addition for detailing our projects. I know I'm addicted to Tracy Fox's labels, but I like to have variety as well, and it's good for adding to edges of some of these elements. So I think that's probably enough to illustrate what I would do to add some collage on the back, just building it up a little bit. And then when we cut this, we'd get a little piece of detail sitting on each of the back of our tags. Let's take a check at where we are. So on 2, we've done one of the bigger jobs. We've collaged on the back of the Masterboard or your cardstock with pale papers. I'm going to add something of colour to the front. So on the front of our Masterboard, I'm going to add some colour, and again, we get choice, of course, about what we want to do. I like to add just a little bit of botanical colour, botanical foliage, leaves. I like to get some green on there. I think the gold is really beautiful and it gives it something special. So I'll show you how I do these really quickly, and I use as the greens, as you can see, well worn, my Kuretake paints. Again, these are from Stationery Pal, quite reasonably priced if you want to take a look, and they're creamy, and this colour in particular is fantastic for really lightening your projects. The gold comes from a little palette with 6 different shades of gold in, again well used, again Stationery Pal. So I'll show you what I do, but you could of course just splot some colour wash down. I've done it with blues and greens here. I really enjoyed that. That was a no thinking style of cover. And you could also do mark making, so you could take pens or pencils and just put some marks on the front. It doesn't really matter. The only thing I'd suggest is you're thinking about the shades that you like to go with the rest of your project. So very quickly showing you this stage, and I won't do all of it. I've got some ready made up to move to the next step. I've got a very thin brush, so light hand, just think about where branches might go and just sweep a little bit. They're not even touching, so there's nothing particularly onerous about this stage. To be honest, it's an excuse to use some of the supplies that I've got. I use a lot of the same stuff in lots of different projects, and sometimes I just want to go back and have a go at using some of those supplies that have just been a little bit forgotten. I don't know if you do that. It's almost like that 80-20 rule where we use, 20% of our clothes 80% of the time. Well, there's a danger in my craft room of using the same 20% of things 80% of the time, and I just feel like I need to keep working on doing different things to keep it fresh. Does that make sense? So quite a few little branches. I've done it in greens and browns, and then I take a bigger brush. This is, in fact, all 3 of these brushes I've got in front of me are from Zen Art, and they're absolutely fantastic for just doing that, press down and come up. I like to get quite a bit of yellow in my leaves to get that fresh sense, that really light sense of spring coming, which I know is just around the corner. So I'll just get those all over, and then I go back in with a narrow brush. I'll go back perhaps in some of the darker colours, and I just give some of these leaves a little bit of vein. It's a development on the approach I've used in previous videos. Just adds a sense of realism to some of those leaves. So we can have some baby leaves as well, using that thin brush. So it's variety. Don't fill it with just the same leaf style if you can, but as I say, a wash of colour works well as well. I'll show you what I do with gold, just to illustrate the point. Wet my brush well. I tend to go for this gold here, which is called red gold. It works superbly well on vintage book pages. I think it's the tone of colour, and there's not only the iridescence in it, but it's got pigment in as well. And again, I just do the same. Oh, look at that. Do the same. Push the brush down, and because it's a soft bristle, it sort of does the work for you. Pull it up, and it means that when you just catch the light on the tag, you get this special luxury sense about your tag, because it's got that little bit of iridescence, which I like. Gives me a sense of vintage. So I would just go over as much or as little as I want. I'd probably add a bit more green to this, but the idea is you've got a backing then for your tags. And as I say, you could do it in blue. A while ago I did a collaboration with Barbara 49 Dragonflies, and I did a smaller style with leaves here, as you can see, in a sort of bluey turquoise colour to match the gorgeous papers that are in one of her kits. So it doesn't even need to be green. You can go wild with different colours, or you could just paint it or use pencils, or you could just leave it as it is. It doesn't matter. So that's a choice, but that just gives me something to work on for these tags. So a little process check without getting the back of my instructions wet from paint. We've painted leaves, or we can do anything on the front. What we need to do now is cut these pieces of Masterboard down, and I like a size, again it's up to you what size you want to do. I like about 14 centimetres by 7.5, which is about 5.5 inches by 3. That's actually this shape and size. So what I will do is set aside my wet one, bring in a dry piece and just cut a little bit of this down. So this has got the same neutral collage on the back, and it's got the foliage in green on the front. One tip, if you struggle with your trimmer to cut through and you don't want it to just bunch up at the end before it starts cutting, is move your blade somewhere in and then move to the outside. And once you've got it going, it's easier, but I find it easier to go in, pierce, and then come out. And that way it goes through it. You can always use a pair of scissors at the end if you want, rather than it butting up against the end here and just ruching, if that makes sense. So what did I say? I said 7.5 by 14, so I can use the measurement on this Fiskars trimmer, which is a really fantastic trimmer. If you're interested in treating yourself to decent tools, which took me time to do, this is one of my favourite tools. It features in a video where I talk about my best tools. So I've got a couple of tags with, let's see what we got on the back. I've got some interesting elements there, but still space to write. I've got some interesting elements there, but still space to write. I'm going to trim off the tops, so just trim off the corners. Just go there and there. And again, if you're doing a large quantity, you can put several of these tags behind the first one that you've cut. That doesn't look right. I think I've gone 2 by 3, but whatever. Turn it over and just cut the other corner for speed. That's all right, I like that shape. And now we're ready to do, we've done step 3, step 4, which is creating our focal point. Again, you could just use images from a book page or digitals, whatever you want. But what I thought I would do is show you how I stamp and paint images on vintage music paper. So I've had a go with a couple of different stamps to create focal points. I've used a flower and I've used a trowel, and I've coloured each of these in a few different ways. So I thought I'd show you the basics for the stamp and the painting, but I thought what would be most useful for you time wise is just to share how I get some of these different styles of painting and colouring rather than doing them all today. So let me show you. So this one, for example, is a trowel, and the pigment in each of these is quite deep, which I like. I love the rich mahogany style red brown that I've got in the handle. So I've done the painting for this one with a new set. Again, this is stationery pal. Oh my word, what have I been doing leaving it on my shelf? It's the first use of it. It's a beautiful set. It's quite dinky, isn't it? Small colours, small little, what are these called, pans, but really beautiful rich colour if you like deep pigment, strong pigment. So I've just used a few of them, like this reddy brown one and some of the oranges and the gorgeous natural sage green to colour in my trowel. And then on the top, on the handle, I just couldn't resist adding a little bit of my gold just to make it shimmer. On this page, you can see I've used it and torn some out already. I had a play, so I've used... Sorry, I haven't got this one out for you. Let's just pull this out. The gold is Ganzai Tambai, that little gold palette, and I've used some of these colours just to have a play. And you can see, I hope, can you see some of that shimmer? So I've got very limited pigment coming through, but I've got some of that blue and purple coming through, which I think is absolutely beautiful. And then I actually used gel pens for the stalks and had a play. And down here I've written it down, I've got twine markers, which are Arteza, and it allowed me to get some of that depth in the centre of the flower, so a bit more richness of colour. Again, I had a play with a few more. And on this one I've done more of the shimmery iridescent paint. Aren't they gorgeous? Particularly the coppery gold ones. I've gone back to the Faber-Castell for this, which I was able to blend. It blended really well. Just think those colours are absolutely gorgeous. For the green I went back to my Kuretake, and then I got a bit more of that rich from the Faber-Castell palette. It's a bit addictive. It's speedy if you want to do a whole page, but I did say if you don't have vintage music paper, and many of us don't, let me just show you one piece of paper that might help. So this, I believe, is a Victoria Designs digital. So there are lots of digitals in Etsy where you can find music paper that if you want to you could stamp on. But you don't need to stamp on music paper. It's another point in our process where you've got choices. You don't even need to stamp and paint. You could pull an image out of a book and use that as well. But if you feel like just getting a little bit arty and you feel like using up some of your supplies, then this is a great project for stamping and just playing with colour. So all I do, I use my archival ink again, and my stamps are getting quite old. I need to definitely get them out and play with them. They're not always completely flat. I think with age things go a bit warped, if you know what I mean. I think it's true for me. So I'll just get my ink on, and I'm very careful when I stamp to press all the way around it, because as I say, it's not completely even, and I've had a few where I haven't completely stamped to the edge. It doesn't really stop me using the image, but I'd like to try to correct that. So there we go, it's a little bit fuzzy. I think I've moved it a bit, such is life. And I would just literally take my paints and have a little play at colouring in. So I'd take a bit of a brown. It's really beautiful. Oh, look at that. Just look at that. Imagine that as a tool in your greenhouse. Beautiful wood. It's very quick, this too. I take this natural sage green. I did think of putting red on the ribbon, but I think the sage green works really well. There. I take a bit of this sandy brown for the trowel itself. Very quick wash. And then a little bit of the grey for the metal there. I've missed some of the green, haven't I? Let's fill that in. And it is as quick as that. So I will now use one of these for the focal point on the front of a tag, and we'll just pull it all together. So we're on step 5, and we're going to collage the front of the tag using one of those stamped and painted images. And I thought I would use one with the trowel. So here are the 2 pieces of tag that we can choose between, so it really doesn't matter which one. How about this one? And what I will do is just tear out, it's actually a really satisfying part of the process, this, one of these trowels. Let's have this row. This old music paper, I'm actually a bit spoilt, came from my friend Rosie, who was clearing out her dad's house, and it is like butter when you tear it. Just listen to this. Oh, it's just sumptuous. Right, I've got a smaller piece, but I don't want straight lines. I think I'm going to put it on the right hand side, and the reason I'm suggesting that is I want to preserve as many of the notes as possible. If I put it over here and reduce the size, I just think I need to take off the blank and keep as much of the actual music notes as possible. That makes sense. So I've narrowed it down, and I'm going to glue that on the side. Try my Oohoo glue. And I will put, in fact, I'm going to tear off a bit more of that corner as well, make it feel a bit more rounded. Same at the bottom. Just make it a gentler shape. There we go. That's better, isn't it? It just looks a bit more tatty and unintentional. So I'll get some glue on the back of that. I don't know if I need to push something underneath this yet, so I'm not taking my glue absolutely all the way to the side. But I'm going to put that on my tag on the right hand side, about there. I am going to add extra down here, so I'm leaving enough space down here. Just put that on there. And I'm going to add one of those little black labels. So these are new ones from Tracy Fox, and I thought I would ring the changes and add some black, which I really like because it goes with the black of those notes. And you can ring the changes where you put any of these elements. There isn't an absolute formula for any of this. On this one it's vertical tucked behind, this one it's horizontal, absolutely on top of it. So just whatever you feel. I think I'll go down there, so I'll get that on. And I'm also going to use, should we get the instructions out of the way? I'm also going to use a little bit of my Amazon packing paper that I have been turning into lovely collage paper again. I did a video, I've actually done some of the videos that are promised. I think I'll have that there. And I think this works incredibly well because that little bit of gold on it, which is gold acrylic paint, just marries up with the gold that's in the handle, trying not to actually cover up too much of the script on the black label, which I really, really like. I'm going to add a little bit of detail, just a little bit, by way of, I don't want that on there, I was going to put glue on my stamp. Oh my word. Do you ever do crazy things in your craft room? Oh my word, tell me you do. Tell me you do. Whoops. It's all going a bit crazy. Yeah, keep it down here. Keep the weight down there. I think that's probably enough. I'm going to add just a little tab at the top. And again, you've got choices as to what you might like to do. I'm going to use this piano key washi tape because it's really quick and easy. You can see I've used it on this one here. On this one I haven't added any tab, I've just added an eyelet. I'll do that in a minute. On this one I've added washi tape and an eyelet. That's a different type of washi tape. And on this one I've added fabric. I just folded it over and glued it on with a little bit of capacity at the top. So what I like to do is, with a tatty edge at the end, I like to do this by tearing. Try by eye to get that in the middle. Fold it over and bring it down and tear it off. And I like washi tape for tabs at the top that are in black and white because there's something just a little bit bold. I'm not even sure that's straight. Can I just slightly line it up just to satisfy me? Yep, there we are. And now what I'm going to do is sew around it. If you don't want to sew around it, or if you don't have a sewing machine, now is the time to take a black pen and just add your faux stitches. And I just do that with either a straight line like that, or you can do straight line and a dot, or you could do any form of wiggle. So I think the definition on the edge of the tag is helpful, and faux stitching works an absolute treat if you don't have a sewing machine. If you do want to sew or you have a sewing machine, so I've gone round in a running stitch and I've added a bit of zigzag for interest, and I've caught the tab at the top where it's fabric, and indeed even if I've got my washi tape on I've gone through it there. I had dark thread in my sewing machine, so that's what I used, and I've rung the changes and put my zigzag at the top left here sometimes to balance the picture. So if I've got the picture on the right, I think it's quite nice to have the zigzag up here on the top left. I just think it adds something. And when you have either done your faux stitching or sewn around it, I think it's nice to add an eyelet and either some ribbon or some thread. This is gorgeous Hessian thread. So I'd just take my crocodile and by eye put it in the cutty bit, as opposed to where I'm supposed to smash down on the eyelet, which is what I did last time and I got it wrong again. I just wasn't thinking, shall we have the yellowy one, the yellow gold, because it goes with the yellow in the flower, and I'll just squish that down. If you've enjoyed making these tags, then check out my video where I make these bird journal cards. I think you'd really enjoy making those too, and I hope to see you soon.